right, we're live. We're back after a week with a very, I don't know what to call last week's script after discussing that, but we're back again. And how you doing, sir? How's your week been? This is your properly scheduled show. I want to thank you again for filling in 2 weeks ago. It was much appreciated.
Yeah, no problem. That was a fun script. My week was great. It's been a great Easter weekend. Have a couple families here in town staying with us, and so it's nice. It is nice to spend time with everybody. So yeah. What about you?
I completely forgot yesterday was Good Friday, and this is the Easter weekend. So luckily, my girlfriend kept me on point for that. But yes, I've had to reorganize my entire, not just the scripts on Saturday plans I had for tasks I was going to do for Friday and Sunday and Monday, but also like all the other stuff that I was like, I was going to sit back, and there's a couple of books I really wanted to read to try and, squeeze in on the weekend because things were kind of slowing down. There's one article that I want to write up for Patreon with regards to if you're a writer and maybe you think someone has stolen a screenplay, what are the actions you can take? Now, this is not legal advice, of course, but just other general advice about understanding how the business works and so forth. So yeah, those things were all in the docket, ready to go.
Step one, buy a baseball bat. Step two, Google this person's first and last name. Oh no, wait, this is
no. That's a different form of revenge. This is more like, if you're going to talk to a lawyer, this is how you can screen which lawyer is actually legit and which isn't without it being legal advice. Because there's certain things you. I'll just put it to you this way: if you think your screenplay was stolen, don't sue the studio that produced it, because they literally aren't the ones that stole it, and the judge will dismiss or rule against you if you do that. It's just the way of how transactions are recorded in the studio system and throughout most of Hollywood. So whenever you think someone has taken your idea, make sure you point to the person that actually did it and not to who they sold it to. And if you include who they sold it to, you're going to lose every time, 100%.
Oh wow.
Yes.
Interesting.
And it's not politics. It's basically just the fact that you've made an accusation to a company that can prove a transaction occurred that was not considered theft.
Gotcha. So you're going after, you went too far. You got to back up and just go after that specific
always go
person.
after it's like if someone steals from you and they go to prison and they serve their time and you do a civil case against them, you don't sue the pawn shop owner that bought the stolen goods off them as well, right? The pawn shop owner is not, unless you can prove the pawn shop owner gave your address to the criminal to steal stuff specifically for them in exchange for money, you don't have a civil case that includes them as well. It's like, it's very, you got to be very diligent and perfect on it. And while there are lots of lawyers, especially in the law tube sphere and whatnot, that will talk to you ad nauseum about ethics and how they'd never do anything that would violate the stuff of the client, if a lawyer says, hey, this studio produced the movie that you think is stolen, we should go after them too, that's a bad lawyer, in my opinion.
Yeah, I can
because
see that.
they're
I like
not
how
interested in winning a case. They're just interested in getting you for money because they get paid either way. So
Yeah, they definitely would get paid either way. I just like how you sort of subconsciously compared pawn shops to some modern day studios. I like that. Thank you. That was very well
and
done.
they kind of are to a degree. It's like, what do you got? This? I'll give you 150 for it.
Script, it's Saturday. You and I always get derailed instantly. Our brains, I think, work a lot alike. We're just like, ooh, shiny thing. This
A
is
little
shiny
bit,
thing.
but that's just because, we want to make sure we sound good, and we want to make sure as people are rolling in that they're not going to miss out on stuff, so we can get
to
started.
the 12 people in chat. Hello. Oh, 14. It just jumped. Bam. Hello,
See,
everybody.
this is why we wait. This is for all you guys out there. All right. So with that being said, let's get into it. You know what? Before we get into it, Friday I was actually going to try and start sampling, because one of the songs that you sent me actually has not been flagged on YouTube. So I was going to try and sample that into the Streamlabs here to actually play it. Wasn't able to do it because I had to do the Good Friday stuff. So that's my next topic.
So it's not ready.
So it's not ready at all. I'm sorry, guys.
I was trying to get you some cool music to kind of spice up the intros.
Yeah, you did. I found one of that you sent me. I clipped out a section that I thought would be really good for this, and I was all set, ready to go. But curse these holidays that aren't like static to the numerical calendar, like part of the Gregorian calendar. Like there's always the third Sunday or the third Friday or whatever. It's like
Yeah, they sneak up on you.
They sneak up on you. Sometimes I just can't plan for it. But okay, with that being said, welcome to Scripts on Saturdays, everybody, the only screenplay review show on the interwebs discussing scripts both professional and amateur, circulating around Hollywood, giving you, the TV and movie-going audience, the behind-the-scenes and inside track on what writers are pushing and what producers are buying. I am your host, the Script Doctor, and joining me this week is TJ Mack of Mac Media. Oh man, we got a good one for you guys.
Oh yeah, hello. I'm so excited. This is this is amazing. I'm excited for today, for real. This is a great script.
Yes, unfortunately it's going to be hard to bury the lead on this one and to talk about all the other aspects because we've got something. So this is our first screenplay that was written last year. So it's a very, very current, very, very fresh, very representative of what is being pitched in Hollywood as with regards to spec scripts or original IP. These are not open writing assignments. This one was number one on last year's Blacklist, the 2023 Blacklist, and it scored 49 votes, which I think is one of the highest votes tallies we've gotten since we started the show in January.
Totally deserves it.
And it's written by Travis Braun. The title of the script is called Bad Boy. And the logline is as such. I love this logline. A rescue dog suspects his loving new owner is a serial killer. That's it. Like, that's the logline. And I'm like, I'm already want to read it. Like,
you don't need more than that, right? Like, it's so
no.
simple. It's so good. And it's not bullshit. Like, it's exactly what you're getting. Like, I love it. It wasn't misleading in any way. So, yes.
Yeah, so regale us with the synopsis that we have up here, please.
Okay, synopsis is long. I will try to read it professionally for everyone who's here. After miraculously surviving a car accident, Gary, a spirited terrier mix, finds himself in the loving care of Cameron, his new owner. However, as Gary explores his new home, he uncovers a chilling secret. Cameron is harboring a woman captive in his basement. Now, Gary must navigate his newfound sense of unease as he grapples with the mysterious presence of the woman in Cameron's basement, unsure of what to make of the situation or whether he should take action.
I mean, this is what piques my ears, just like a dog when it hears the sound like, bone or cookie or something of the nature. You just perk up and you're like, okay, this is neat because now we have a screenplay that's from the perspective of a dog, and it's not a children's story. So you don't have the dog talking, and you don't have a look who's talking type of narration or a homeward bound type of, inner monologue from the dogs communicating with each other. It's got this kind of silent movie aspect to it, but there's still a lot of dialogue.
Yeah, and you nailed it earlier. It's sort of an Alfred Hitchcockian type angle, really.
Yeah,
you feel that just reading it. I've got my little puppy at my feet right now. I have a 2-year-old Aussie Doodle that's black. His name's Tux. And anything with dogs, I'm instantly like, oh, okay. I've always loved dogs, but when you have a dog, it takes it to a new level, right? Like. And so seeing all the stuff through his eyes and the way this writer so fantastically captures subtle nuances without getting too wordy, just kind of just plopping it down on the page and then moving on was so good. It was so good at every aspect. So yeah, I just don't know. I mean, we need to start at the beginning, I guess. But yeah, where do you want to start here, script?
Well, I mean, we start with basically, a little Hitchcockian. It's also a little Kubrick in the sense that we have this very pleasant opening where, mom and dad and kid are in the car. The kid is playing with the dog, Gary. And the dog's a little old. It's 9 years old. That's not young for a dog. So it's got some mileage on it.
Yeah, and his name's Gary. I've never met a dog named Gary. Like, can we just address that for a second? Sure. Gary.
Gary
and you don't care.
Dog.
You're like, I don't care. I love Gary. Gary's great. You can call him anything, but Gary's just, I love how it's such a unique name for a dog. I've never heard of a dog named Gary.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's also a very excited dog. Like, it's got a lot of energy, even though, I had 5 dogs growing up, and average age, if you're lucky, was maybe 13 before they were just too old or passed away or what have you. So, the dogs have a very short lifespan, and here I'm thinking, it's like, oh, you got a 9-year-old dog? Okay, that's going to be tough because he's, 9 times 7, that's 42 years, dog years. So, he's older than me in that regard. So I'm like, okay, he's not exactly in the prime for his species, but he's still hopping around. He's in the back car. He's playing catch with Asher, who Gary views as his human, It's his favorite
Mm-hmm.
human, the kid. All
Mm-hmm.
dogs love children more than they do the adults to some degree, unless you're a weird owner that has trained them to only like you and not the kids, which I know a couple of owners like that. Um, but we have this great little thing where, the mom's driving, they're stuck behind a big tractor trailer that's going like 10 miles an hour on a road. They want to get ahead of it so they can get home.
Yep.
The dad's
And
like, it's okay.
growing
Just,
up, I was going to say growing up in Idaho, I can totally relate to that. Happens all the time, especially in spud season where you get a lot of tractors and heavy equipment on the roads. And this road that they're on reminds me a lot of this one road called County Line Road where I grew up, which there was always accidents every year, fatalities every year. It's just a 2-lane road, speed limit's 50 miles an hour, but every mile there's a two-way stop for the other traffic, and notoriously people would run those two-way stop signs and get hit. And so anyway, but yeah, being stuck behind, a big combine or a tractor trailer, whatever it is, like I totally get that. And they're trying to get to where they're going and it's frustrating. And you know what I just picked up on the script too? I just must have glossed over this. We were talking about how big Gary is, and it's right here on page right at the beginning. I'm looking at the PDF page 4. But he's 45 pounds.
oh yeah,
So,
it's his bigger side on the terrier
so
mix side. Okay, yeah, so
yeah,
he's a
and
heavy.
I was guessing because remember we were discussing. We'll get to that later, but we were discussing how he could do certain things depending on how large or small he was. So, anyway, I just want to throw that in there.
Yeah, so okay, so he's 45 pounds. And he's not described as overweight, so that's a good thing.
Yeah.
So and he's able to hop
Partly.
between the back seat and the trunk of the station wagon because he's playing catch with Asher. He's throwing the tennis ball. It's getting to the groceries. The parents don't care; they're fine with that. The dad is like, "Listen, we'll get home when we get home." Good farmers mentality type. It happens when it happens. No rush, just patience. And the mom's like, I'm going to go into the other lane to get around him. And she does, and you get this jump scare where oncoming traffic comes in, but nothing happens. And you're like, oh, okay, that's cool. And then I think it's a little vague in the description of the script, but it's done so deliberately because we get a car accident. It seems to me like they get T-boned from someone coming out of the field, hitting them, and
I
or
don't
something
want
of
to
that
correct you,
nature. But like,
but yeah.
it's really
So what
it's
it was,
jarring. Yeah.
yeah. So and I love this little red herring. Red herrings sometimes feel like a total if they're obvious, you're just like this is stupid, right? But a good red herring is so subtle and so quick that you don't have a chance to really overanalyze it, and then you just go, whoa, okay. And this writer is fantastic at red herrings in this script. There's several. But what happened is the guy driving the tractor with the discs on the back, he stopped to open a gate, and he
Right.
was blocking their lane of traffic, but it's right after a curve. And so while they're waiting behind this tractor, yeah, another I think that it was
A
a
tow
tow
truck.
truck.
Yeah, tow truck
Yes,
runs the curb at 60 miles per hour and just
comes around the corner, couldn't see him in time, and bam, runs right into the back of him and shoves them into. That's how I saw it. Shoves them into the back of those discs on that tractor, and it just shreds their car. Just shreds it. So that's how I read it, but I could be wrong.
well, I mean, either way, it's like the car is basically mangled and the engine is
Yes.
to bits and stuff. And the
Oh,
only
it's so sad.
it's so tragic because the only survivor is Gary. And when he finds Asher lying in the ground, and the script is very specific to point out that Asher loves wearing this Captain America T-shirt or
A
shirt.
blue Captain America shirt. Yep, yep.
And that's what Asher like sniffs out, finds, and he's licking Asher's face. Not Asher. That's what Gary sniffs out, finds, licking Asher's face, trying to wake him up. Nothing happens. And what ends up being is like the first responders grab Gary, take him to the vet. He gets his paw put into a cast because he has a broken leg, or at least a severe fracture, and he's put into a kennel where hopefully someone will come and adopt him. And he's there for a few days, and it's a small cage with little attention, no sunlight. And it's very dourly described.
Yeah, I mean, if you've ever been to a kennel, they're usually well lit, but that doesn't mean they're like a happy place to be. There's lots of barking. It's loud. It's echoey. It doesn't smell very nice. They're all in their crates. Like it's not good. And this is the part that I love about this writer is he captures everything from the dog's point of view so many times, and we kind of bounce out of that, but a lot of it is from Gary's point of view. And when he heard the truck coming before anyone else did, but he was so focused on the ball, he didn't think much about it. It shows you how tough dogs are, because this happens a lot in real life where dogs survive accidents where people die, and it's like, dude, dogs are tough. And Gary Gary, when he goes over and rests his chin on the kid, man, I hated it. I mean, we're 2 or 3 pages into the script. We don't even know these people, and I care more about them than I do a lot of characters in current films,
Yeah.
right? Like there's more character development in like 2 or 3 lines of dialogue and their situation than, I'm like, Jeannie, I want to meet Jeannie. Like she was driving, like, anyway, like it's just so good at this point. We're barely into it, and I'm already like, oh my gosh, that opening. And that's, in my opinion, any story should do that. It should hook you in the first few pages.
That's the goal. That's
Yeah,
100% the goal, and this
yeah.
writer does it great. Like his name is what is it? Travis Braun. He's actually been writing for at least 10 years, and you can tell with just how quickly he's able to define these three characters plus Gary in such a short amount of time, and then make you feel for them when this accident occurs. He presents conflict, which is like, oh, they want to get home, okay, but what is happening? Well, the wife wants to take a little bit of a risk. The dad's more not so much controlling, but he's more composed, cool, collected. He's like, we'll get home when we get home, all the type of stuff. She's got her own priorities. There's the conflict between them is not like, oh, I hate you or anything of that nature. It's just simple. Okay, we both want the same goal, but this is the two different approaches, but we see the chemistry there. And then you've got in the back seat the kid playing with his dog, and you just completely understand and relate to it. It's very, very broad, using very broad strokes to get you involved and allow you as the reader or the audience member to just kind of imprint onto these characters very quickly, so that when the tragedy happens, you actually feel it really, really strongly. And because the dog, the most innocent of creatures that you can have in any type of story, really, cats not so much because cats are vindictive by nature, but dogs, you immediately latch onto that dog and you're like, I want this dog in my life. I want to adopt this dog. I want to take care of this dog. This dog is the best dog ever. We see how much it cares when it is as soon as it finds the kid, and it just won't leave that kid's side. And you're like, that's it. You win it. And doing that all within 5 pages, you basically hooked your reader. You get that done well in the first couple minutes of the movie. You've hooked your audience. They're not going to leave. There's also probably not going to be a dry eye in the house for that first 10 minutes or so, which is even better, because it gives them time to kind of sober up as they realize, okay, what's going to happen to Gary now?
Right. And of course, if you're sitting in the seat at this point, and say this was made, right, you know what you're in for, like, okay, a serial killer and a dog. But 10 minutes into the film or 5 minutes into the film, how long this would take to shoot, you're invested in Gary because, and let me ask you this from a writer's standpoint, is that sort of the magic sauce? Is you're like, okay, we put these people in a situation that's very, you don't want to say generic because generic equates to boring, right? But it's something relatable. It's something very common. And so here we have, these mom and dad, getting groceries on the way home. They just want to get home. They're stuck in traffic, which everyone can relate to that. Everyone can relate to getting groceries. Everyone can relate to, that sort of frustration.
Being stuck behind someone who doesn't know how to drive.
Yeah. And so
whether it's a tractor or not.
Is this all 100% engineered by our writer to, like, you know what I mean? Like, did he rewrite this opening scene several times to get it whittled down to where he's like, okay, this is all I need. Yeah. It's perfect. It's not overdone. And my audience is going to be with me and with Gary and empathize with Gary. And from here on, let's go. Like, is this all 100% engineered, or is some of this just kind of like, oh, we got lucky and this all kind of came together just right to pull the audience in?
Well, a good writer will actually just boil it down to only what you need to show and not anything else. Like that's just it. It's like, okay, what is the point? For this story here, the point is getting Gary adopted by the suspected serial killer as quickly as possible. And in order for us as an audience to connect with Gary, we have to put him in a very life-changing position. And that is basically, instead of just having him show up, or just having this regular dog at a kennel where we know nothing about, let's show how he got to that kennel. And it's only a single step back, because it's not like trying to, say, do a prequel to something where you're going all the way to, he's born and then we follow his life for years, all the way up with him and Asher. It's like, no. It's just, okay, what's something that's very average day to day for this family with this dog? And it's like, okay, broad spectrum task. We need to set up a family that conveys their love for the dog and vice versa, and then get rid of them so that we can actually attach ourselves to this dog and care for them. And not
Writers
just
are scary, man. Writers are serial killers themselves to like write this stuff. Like, okay, here's their wonderful family. Let's kill them.
Well, you got to go into dark places because that's where drama comes from, and it's not.
I get it.
And the thing is
it's
that
still kind of messed up if you analyze it, though. You're like,
well,
wait, you had
the
to
thing
keep
is,
doing
this is the only place where, I mean, I speak for myself mostly, and some of my colleagues. This is the only time where we ever get twisted and dark is on the page. Like, you put us in a situation in the real world where something dark is happening. It's like we're not going to go with it. We're actually going to fight against it and maybe even, get involved to the point of trying to stop it or at least call it out in some regard, because the reason we write this in fiction is because we know it's bad and we know it elicits a certain aspect, and we hope that it doesn't actually repeat itself in life, but we do know that the possibility is there, and the idea is that we want to get those emotions in a safe environment, which is through the medium of fiction, right? It's like, okay, we never want to experience a car accident or lose somebody or anything of that nature, but we do know it happens. So if we want to, evoke those emotions but keeping the audience in a headspace where they're going to make a connection, but it's not going to traumatize them, unlike certain horror films, which, mostly the gore, Eli Roth crap. That's
like
a whole
Saw.
nother,
Like, I'm not a fan of that stuff.
Saw,
It's just gruesome.
That's
I don't
just
like that stuff.
That's just to mess with people's minds and imaginations, and there's a lot of disturbing natures on there. And those are not really written by writers; they're written by special effects people and directors more so.
Yeah.
Although they qualify as writers because they did do the work, but not to
Besides,
diminish them.
Saw didn't work from the get-go because everyone knows that Wesley escaped the pit of despair with his life. He was fine. He was only
Yes.
he was only half dead or
Well,
whatever.
when I
it's fine.
saw on opening night at the premiere, I knew that the guy in the bathroom thing, whatever it was, wasn't dead, because we saw this. Danny Glover finds the model and he's like, well, how would he know that the dead guy's going to be there? Like, you can't predict that. Like, you can predict the other two guys, like you could chain them up, but how would you know? It's like, oh, he's the dead guy. That's the guy. He's watching these people. He's just playing. He's faking dead. And I said that a little louder than I expected because I was actually surprised. And then everybody looked at me and told me to shut up. And then when the twist happens, like, I felt all the eyes in that section of the theater just stare down on me. And then they asked, like, are you the writer? I'm like, no, I'm just.
No, but Script, you're the guy in 1977, like 100 people deep at the Star Wars premiere, and you're like, I can't believe that Darth is Luke's father. Or sorry, I guess that would have been
1980
Empire. But yeah, so anyway, that's just funny that you were that guy. I can't. You're the last person I
But
expected.
it was crazy because it was the first showing of the day, and so like nobody had actually seen the movie. They all just went in there because it was just one of the earlier screenings. Most of the people in the audience were critics. Its official premiere, I think, was like the next couple days after that. It was so messed up, but I was like, oh, okay, I was like, this is clever, this is ingenious. Oh, he's that guy. Okay, cool. And then everybody was just upset. But that sidebar here, we actually have really proper red herrings, like things that are really good, proper setups.
So good. All right, let's keep going. Let's get into it. We got a little bit, but yes, I love the red herrings in this. They were every single one. I did not feel cheated. They were perfect. So
they were well earned and well framed in ways where you're like, okay, because a good red herring gives you doubt, and if you don't have the doubt, then it's not effective enough for you to care about what's going on the page. And what I really enjoyed about this one is that we get the introduction to Cameron, who is this, like, he's this heavy, he's mid-40s, he's got lonely eyes, and he's coming in there for a specific breed. And we can hear one of the employees of the shelter, of the kennel, saying, yeah, you're lucky you called today. We had a whole bunch of people calling for this dog. It's like, clearly this guy's trying to sell the dog at a higher markup. But for some reason, Cameron catches Gary, looks at him, and there's just the connection there, and it's beautifully established. And Gary's like, I'm gonna take him, and what follows is absolutely brilliant. And this is something that's shows. It's like, how do you convey that this dog is a lot smarter than other dogs? And so what they do is they have Cameron take Gary outside to his truck, and he tries to get Gary into the truck, but Gary won't go in the truck. And the reason Gary won't go in the truck is because we were described that he was in essentially a truck or something, a larger vehicle like a truck. He survived the accident, and he's got trauma to that. He's got a connection. He's made a connection between a large vehicle, 4 tires, and losing his family.
Yep.
And you completely empathize with the dog, and Cameron doesn't know why, but he's like, I guess you just don't like trucks. Well, he tries to talk to him and says, like, it's 4 miles home. And the dog's like, nope. And the dog's got, a broken leg and a cast, and it itches. And, Gary's like pawing at it and gnawing at it because it's irritating, as dogs tend to do. That's why they invented the cone around their neck for those things, which they don't put Gary in for this, which is interesting. But what ends up happening,
cone of shame, yeah, that's true.
We get something that's actually really endearing, which is that Cameron picks up the dog and walks with him in his arms 4 miles to his farmhouse. And you're like, okay,
45-pound dog. 45-pound dog, dude.
A 45-pound dog is like, I like this Cameron guy now. He cares about the animal. Boom.
Yes,
over.
And again, and it's believable because he wasn't like, it's 20 miles. Like it's okay, 4 miles. That's a long ways. And yeah, so you instantly go, I like this guy a lot. In fact, can we pause here for a moment? And I'm like, the log line cheats us of this red herring, right? Because Cameron his name's Cameron. He is his own red herring. We think he's a nice guy. That's the red herring. And it would be lovely to go into this film just knowing, hey, a serial killer is involved. I don't know how we'd have to rewrite the log line and be like, yeah, there's a serial killer involved in the nearby or at the neighbors or near whatever. I don't know how you want to write it, but instead of just straight up telling us that he suspects his own owner is, because that's kind of like that cheats me out of falling for this thing where I'm like, he is a nice guy. This is amazing, right? And I guess if you could forget that for a few moments, then you could be surprised, right? When we find out what's in Cameron's basement, what's coming up. But I feel like it would be even better if we had no idea that Cameron, we're just for the next 20 minutes, Cameron's the best owner in the world. He carries this dog 4 miles because he doesn't want to traumatize him by putting him in the vehicle. He then he goes home. He won't eat kibble, so he gives him some chicken.
Gives him some
chicken. Won't eat it. Yeah, so he falls
gives him
asleep,
some chicken.
sitting next to him.
He leaves the dog alone with the chicken, who the dog finds a place in the house that he claims as his own, which is basically a utility closet with the laundry machine. Which dogs like the vibrations and the sound, and also some of the heat. So they usually make a nice little home there. But while Gary's in there, like eating some of the chicken and then getting situated there, Cameron leaves to go back and get his car, and then also groceries, more things for the house and for the dog. Mm-hmm. Which is awesome, because even Cameron says, these whole chickens are 2-for-1 sale, so have as much as you can, buddy. And he keeps calling the dog buddy, and doesn't know what his name is, hasn't figured it out yet. Thinks about naming him after like a Colts player from football.
Well, yeah, and there's this one part. Can I read a couple lines? What are the rules on reading directly from the script? Can we do that? Is that
you
right?
can do a couple of stuff. Yeah.
So Cameron, he's trying to get him to eat the chicken. He won't eat it in the bowl, so he puts some in his hand, and then he ends up falling asleep next to. This is a sweet moment. He falls asleep next to Gary, leaning against the wall, sitting on the floor, and he's got the chicken in his hand. And then it says, hours later, Cameron snores against the wall, that chicken still in his hand. Gary watches him in the darkness. His eyes shift from Cameron to the chicken. Cameron, chicken, Cameron, chicken. Gary licks his lips. Man, that chicken smells good. He inches towards it, keeping an eye on Cameron, starts eating the chicken. Cameron stirs and smiles down at Gary. That's so good, right? Yeah. Again, this Cameron guy's he's such a nice guy who not many people just sit there so long, so patiently they'd fall asleep next to the dog that's been traumatized, He's just such a good dude. And I think if we could not have any idea at all that he's a bad guy until the reveal of what's in the basement, it would have been even better. It's already great, but I'm just saying it would have just taken a little bit better to be like, what? This guy's a killer? It's just crazy.
But we get another red herring thrown in, and that's the next door neighbor with the bloodshot eyes who keeps on staring across the yard to the house.
Like from a Looney Tunes cartoon. Yeah, that's how I pictured it, peeking through the blinds.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is where, this is why the log line is good, because it's setting you, it's not a bait and switch. It's basically saying, this is what's happening, but we're going to throw in a bunch of red herrings or distractions to make you doubt if that's the case. We want to make you fall in love with the dog, fall in love with Cameron, think that this is going to be a great best friend relationship, man and dog partnership, and then we're going to throw in a neighbor that's a bit too curious about things going on, and also a bit too suspicious, because the first time when Randy leaves to go to work, when Cameron leaves to go to work, Gary, gets out into the backyard. He's sniffing around, marking his territory. He manages to undo the latch of the gate, just by accident. And then as he's sniffing around in the forest outside, he comes across, of course, a turd from a raccoon, which, as we were talking before the show, he eats, and then we both gagged at that because that's what dogs do.
Yeah, and then what does the writer say? He say, "Dogs be dogs," I think was the direct quote.
Dogs be
And
dogs,
like,
yeah. Because
dogs eating crap, yes.
I
that's what we
really
wanna
wish
see.
I was there at the moment just so I could smack that away from the dog so he wouldn't eat it. But Gary then, as he's sniffing around more, he finds a tennis shoe.
Red shoe.
A red shoe, and he chews on it a little bit, and then he starts taking it back. And as he does, that's when we see Randy again, and Randy is really concerned, and he goes after the dog. And so now we're wondering, okay, because this is how the screenplay sets it up. It makes a connection between the red shoe and Randy, because Randy's now chasing after the dog, and Gary is running back inside. He goes through the doggy door, and plays with the shoe, and then Randy is trying to get through the doggy door to get after that shoe. And it's written quite well. It's very intense, and it basically is conveying to the audience no, the log line is right that he suspects his new owner is a serial killer, but we are using this scene to try and make you think Randy's the serial killer, and that's
because why does he care so much about this shoe? Right, yeah,
exactly.
It sets it up so well,
and it's really well set up, and even some of the little dialogue that Randy and Cameron have with each other, where he's like, yeah, see you got a new dog, that type of stuff. They keep them separate for quite a significant portion of the screenplay. It's not until well into the second act where they actually have technically a conversation. But what we're getting most of the time is that Gary is all alone in this home for the day. He's sniffing around, he's figuring out, getting situated, getting comfortable. Cameron comes in with food, not just with kibble, but sometimes he has chicken, or sometimes he has salmon, which
ooh, yum yum. He loves that.
Gary is described as that's the best thing ever. It's the best food in the world right now, and it's really focused on that.
Salmon or peanut butter, but he loves that salmon for sure.
And then
don't forget Cameron even cuts off the cast because he went and bought him that brace, remember? So it wasn't as itchy. Another thing, Cameron's such a nice owner. He's such a good dude.
Yeah, he gets the cast, it feels gets the cast off, puts on the brace. Gary's described it's feeling better. He's able to move around a lot easier. And then we hear a repeated rattling coming from the basement.
Ting, 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 ting.
Yep. Yeah. And what's Cameron say? It's darn radiator, or darn air conditioner, or something. It's I'll go.
The water heater. It's the water heater in the
right, the water
heater.
heater.
Yep.
I'll go, and then he's you stay here, I'm going to go fix it. Because he talks to Gary, not just as a pet, but also as another person in the room, which I really liked. It just makes Cameron that more likable. So he ends up unlocking this basement door, which is a lot thicker and bulkier looking than regular doors, but a dog like Gary's not going to realize that. And then he goes down, and after a few moments comes back up. He's hopefully that'll do it. And then closes the door, and they go back to watching TV. Cameron drinks his Pabst Blue Ribbon, watching the game.
Watches his football.
Watches his football. And then he's like, I'm going to take you to work with me, Gary. And would you like that? And Gary's doesn't care. But this is where Cameron figures out the sweet spot on a dog. The area where you scratch on a dog, and it's I am yours forever. And that's right behind Gary's ear. Just do a nice little scratch, and then his eyes go heavy, and he just is in complete bliss and just falls asleep. And then we get taken away to Cameron's place of work, which is pretty much like a Lowe's, like a big, hardware store, gardening store, all that type of thing. And Gary is leashed up outside, and he's seeing other customers and interacting with stuff. And then
you glossed over one small thing, which was Cameron's nightmare that Gary kind of observes. Yeah, I don't know if you want to hit on that. It was really brief, but yeah, we see that Cameron's definitely got some troubles going. That was our first little peek behind the mask. He's having that really weird nightmare, saying, he's I think he's just saying please, please, or something.
Yeah, please, don't. I'm good. Don't. And then the dog kind of jumps into bed to watch him, and then nuzzles up next to him, and then that calms Cameron down.
Calms him down. Yeah. And then we go to Lowe's. Let's go to work.
Then we go to Lowe's, and there's a couple of other characters, but they're not properly introduced because they're not really there to facilitate anything other than to just show Randy and his day-to-day stuff. But then
Hmm.
we get introduced to essentially like the third character in this movie, which is Kat, who's a 28-year-old blonde who she doesn't have her life all together. She works at some other shop. She doesn't work at Lowe's, but she wants a plant to spruce up her apartment. But the thing is, she can't take care of it, so she wants one that is basically self-automated.
Yeah, she's straight up something I can't kill. And then again, Cameron being a nice dude was very like helpful and kind and courteous um
And while he's
yeah,
helping her, it's like she's waiting. She's eating like I think a peanut butter bar, a peanut butter energy bar,
correct.
and
Yep.
Gary sniffs it out, and he's going after her, trying to beg for food. And Kat's like, I hate dogs. I hate cats. I hate dogs. I hate all pets. I don't want you in there. This is mine. No. And then eventually she just gives him a little piece of the energy bar. And of course, Gary is like, this is the greatest food ever. Which dogs are like, anytime they're eating something,
Oh,
tasty.
peanut butter. My dog it's his favorite. So I
Yeah.
can vouch for my dog. That's his favorite is peanut butter. We put it in his Kong, and he wants it after every dinner meal, dude. He looks forward to that every day. So yeah, and I loved Kat. We learn a lot from her just by how she kind of talks to Gary. She's like, dude, seriously, like she's so chill, so relaxed, just your average like early 20s, girl that's just kind of just starting life, getting it all kind of figured out. And it's no coincidence her name's Kat, right? Like it's Kat, but usually short for Catherine. But yeah, I think that was on purpose too. So we have this dog and cat relationship, right? Huh? Funny
Yep,
little
honey.
undertones there. And then yeah, so we see Cameron and Kat meet, and unbeknownst to Kat, this is not someone she should have crossed paths with. She's gonna regret this later. But yeah, I liked how it was very well written. Didn't waste a ton of time, like you said. Didn't waste time on characters that we don't care about. Just as coworker was used as a frame to give us a little more backstory. That Cameron did have a dog previously that he just lost. He told everyone to cancer, and we'll find out more about that later as well.
Yeah, it's actually a tragic thing because he's got a picture of him and the dog on the mantle, a lot next to like his family and stuff. So you can tell that Cameron loves this dog, and there's something else going on here. But we don't really get much to that because when we go back to the home, like this happens a couple of times where we get a few little snippets of Gary at the work, and like how Cameron's supervisor is not too happy that the dog is there, all that. But we also find out that there is a woman already in the basement, and Cameron has a particular type. It's like a petite blonde woman, which is what
Yeah,
Kat
like a
fits
short
into.
blonde hair, I think. Yeah.
Short, like a bob or something of that nature. And what ends up happening is like Gary hears something, and he manages to pushes his head through the vent and is able to get a little bit inside to see what's going on in the basement. And what we find is this woman is sitting on a chair, and Cameron is sitting in her lap with his head in her neck, shoulder area. And the woman is telling Cameron that he's a good boy. And it's really creepy.
So creepy. So creepy. We need a better adjective than creepy, but yeah, it was just, oh my God. You're like, what? And this is our first like slap in the face. Like, here's the real Cameron. Here's the real Cameron.
Yeah.
A quick thing that happened right before that, though, remember, was they came home from work and the house had been broken into because Randy had clearly got into the house to try and look for that shoe. So that was another small red herring where we're like, oh, Randy, the neighbor, the crazy guy, broke into his house. We know that's who probably did it, right? Remember that?
Oh, right. Yes. That's that. Did that happen before?
Yeah.
It
I'm
did?
just scrolling through. It's easier for me because you're talking and I'm just
Right.
kind of scrolling through the script. So yeah. Yeah, but that's kind of what happened. And then that night is when we see, that scene that you're describing.
Yeah. And it's not just that he's doing it. It's like, you can tell this woman's been here for a while.
Oh, so sad.
and Gary the dog has no concept of what this is. And I really like that. I like the fact that they didn't go into like fantasy or supernatural where Gary's like, oh, this is wrong. I got to do something. I'm going to go, be Lassie, run across the street, down the road to the police
Timmy's
station.
in the well.
Timmy's in the well. Or Cameron's got a lady at home. It's just,
Yeah. Yep.
So, I mean, I'm glad that didn't do that. I'm glad that kind of played into the limitations of the dog, because otherwise it would have completely pulled me out. And what's fascinating is how we were getting closer and closer to this. This woman is kind of like not fulfilling. Like, there's nothing sexual going on here, and that's what makes it even more creepier. Like, Cameron doesn't really care about that. He's just there because we're slowly learning is that Cameron was abused heavily as a child, and he's trying to find a way to sort of cleanse his memory of that, but he's doing it in the most horrendous type of manner. He's been kidnapping these women that look like his mother, trying to relive his youth by getting this woman to tell him he's a good boy and he's not.
I would say rewrite his youth, because she wouldn't give him this thing, right? So
Right.
so he wants to rewrite that youth, and instead of his mother telling him he's a bad boy, he's got these replacement mothers telling him he's a good boy. And then once he gets that satisfaction from them, or fails to get the proper satisfaction of them convincing him that he's a good boy, he then kills them. That's how I read it. What do you think, Script?
No, that's exactly it, because we learn more that as we tour this farmhouse that he's in the property, there's a barn with a whole bunch of cages, and we find out that Cameron was thrown into one of these cages, and it also at some point cost him his pinky finger on one hand.
Mm-hmm.
And
we never get the details on that, do we? We just know that, obviously it happened.
We just know that it happened, and that there's loose connections between all of these aspects that's going on with the property and with Cameron and what's going on here. So it's really like, okay, we have a tragic history for Cameron into what bred him into this monster that he is, but we also see that he's caught between two worlds. There's an innocence to him that's pure, but it's been tainted by this guilt, and the tainting of it is what's driving him to do things that he otherwise shouldn't do. And the fact that he's succumbed to it makes him this really interesting villain, because, I mean, there's always the arguments, well, we don't want sympathetic villains. It's like, well, this is one where the sympathy is justified, but his behavior is what's actually eating away at that sympathy. So you're basically watching someone that you like and you feel for, and then you're slowly realizing that the monster underneath is actually just kind of eating away all that innocence, so that you do end up hating this guy by the end. And one of the things that I really liked is how they use Gary as a proxy to that, to convey that, because it's like, you're not supposed to like this guy for what he's doing. It doesn't matter how well he treats the dog. Him treating the dog is kind of like an anchor of salvage to keep him pure, even though he's doing these horrible things. And the thing is like, whatever it is, it's still not enough to actually get him to not have to worry or do this stuff anymore. It's a teeter-totter. It's a balancing act, and it's not, and the thumb is already on the side of the scale that's evil.
Right. And so let's hit pause for a second. I want you to zoom out. I want the script doctor analyzation to kick in right here. So when you're writing this character, what are some of the bullet points that you would highlight that help you not go too far with trying to get the reader or the audience to empathize with someone that's so evil, but also not to make him so evil that it's just a dude in a black hat, right? It's so cliche. You want that conflicting emotions of the viewer to kind of be like, well, I really empathize, but he's also a horrible human being. Like, how would you kind of give advice, or how would you break down that as well as you could to try and capture that type of a character on the page?
Well, the first thing I'd do is I'd say, tell the writer, commit to what outcome you want the audience to have with this character. And that is, if you want them to be hated, you got to commit to that, which means that the bad things that they do, they have to be bad, and they have to be chilling enough. And then if you want to make him more evil, you have to find a way for that character to justify that it wasn't his fault, because that's going to be the fatal flaw. That is the flaw of a lot of villains, is that they don't think the actions they commit are their fault. It's the fault of the rest of the world, and what they're doing is in response to that, and if anything, they are going to try and fix it somehow. Fix the world to suit their needs, as opposed to growing up, understanding that the world is difficult and rolling with the punches and not letting it corrupt you. Because that's essentially what happens, is that the world, the universe itself is trying to corrupt you as the individual, and it's how well you persevere and rise above it that makes you fight off the world. And those that fail, that's their tragedy, but that tragedy morphs into ruthlessness when based on how they react to it. Because there's some that fail and then they just are defeated and killed by the world, and then there's some that fail and then they manipulate everything around them to try and fight back against the world, but not fight back in the sense of to make the world kind of balance out to them, but actually to be subjugated by them. So you got to play around with all those types of aspects, because, like, heroes are selfless and villains are selfish. So If a villain isn't doing something for selfish reasons in order to get, their form of justice or their mentality, then you're not doing well. And if you're trying to, like for instance with last week's script, the main character in that one, the world was bending around to appease her, and nobody hated her. Anyone that challenged her was challenging her because she instigated something that she felt was wrong, and stirred up everything that ended up causing the crap show that we ended up seeing in that story. And it was a lot of conjecture and manipulation to make her in the right, as opposed to, okay, let's have some doubt, let's have some problems, some real conflicts, and let's actually set her back to see whether or not she's a good person or not. Here, we have situations where it's this character, a lot of the things that this character does makes them a good person. He's a good employee. He's got some friends at work. He has a dog he loves.
He has a perfectly manicured lawn. You notice that? We touch on that several times.
He has a perfectly manicured lawn. And the only thing he doesn't maintain is his house and the barn. And it's like, okay, so that's a little bit of his flaws. He's focused on things that are very much particular to him in one area and a little bit off in another. Like, we slowly learn that this farm and everything is inherited. He didn't buy it. His parents died, left it to him. That's what he has. And he hasn't done a good job taking care of it, but he takes care of the lawn, he takes care of his job, and he takes care of his dog. So if those are the three things he cares about and the rest is not, it shows a separation between his parents and what he cares about. And
I just saw another. I just
selfish.
noticed. Sorry, script. Go
ahead.
Before I lose this train of thought, I just thought of another sort of, I guess you'd call it a metaphor with his character, which is he sucks at fixing things. You notice that?
Yeah.
Like he tries to quote unquote fix stuff and he never can quite get it right. And I'm like, I just realized, that just hit me. I'm like, oh yeah, well that plays into how broken he is, right? It's another little thing that kind of tips us to, yeah, this guy can't get things right. And so if he can't get it right, then he figures out another way to try and fill that void. Same thing with what he's doing to murder these women. So anyway, I just thought I'd throw that out
it's
there.
not just that if he can't fix it, if he can't fix it, he disposes of it and gets something new.
Right.
And that's one of the things that's
except for the combine. The combine, he subbed that out and he had the guy fix that. But
it's probably more expensive to get a new combine than it is to get a new
It totally
radiator.
It totally is. I just think it's funny that you're right.
But he does throw out that he basically says, okay, we'll get rid of the radiator. How much to get the new one? A couple of weeks. Because that leads into this next part where we get introduced to the combine and what he does with this. And that is when the woman that he's got in his basement is not meeting his needs. And it's, again, this isn't a sexual thing. It's just there's a conflict between them, and he ends up having to take her out. He then bags her up in a couple of tarps, making like a tarp cocoon, which I thought was a very good use of words.
Yep, very easily and very descriptive. Very easy to imagine that.
And they take her out to the cornfield, drop her off, and this is what makes it really twisted. This is where you actually have your full turn that you actually hate this guy.
Yeah.
He gets into the truck. Gary hops in as well, and Gary's now like just sitting on the bench seat next to him. He turns on the lights, turns on the carbine, and then just drives over the dead woman in the tarp cocoon. And you get the description of all the blood and guts and bones are just being shot out the rear into the cornfield, forever lost. And it's a really disturbing scene. It's also disturbing because Gary finds a bone underneath the seat, and he's chewing on it. And he's like loving it.
Hold on, let me read this so we get it just right. I right in front of me. I love this.
Go for it.
He sniffs at the cab, follows his nose to the seat, then under the seat, paws at something, wedged in the corner, hooks his claws on it, pulls out a doggy bone, half chewed, scoops it up into his mouth.
Yep.
But soon, we later find out, right? We revisit this bone, right?
It's not a doggy bone. It
is not a doggy bone.
It's clearly a bone from another person.
That didn't need to exist at all, and this still would have been a great story. But that's one of those little things like that makes, I think, a great writer separate from a good writer, is these little things get peppered throughout that just, once they're all combined, you're just like, dude, this is so good. It's just so good. But yeah, he just runs her over with the combine and turns her into, just think Fargo with the wood chipper, basically, only a little bit faster. And that's the end of that's the end of the evidence. Turns into fertilizer in the cornfield.
Turns into fertilizer in the cornfield, and then at the same time, it's not starting up again. And then you have this bit where they're out in the cornfield during the day, And the mechanic has come in and he's like, man, what are you chewing up with this thing? Rocks? He's like, I think I got a rock or something because, bone is relatively dense in various areas of the human body. And it's clearly he's been doing this a number of times to the point where it's basically burning out parts of this old combine. Mm-hmm. And what's funny is how the mechanic says, why are you worried about starting this up? You've got all these cornfields out here. They don't look like they've been tended to or anything in like a decade. And I really like the technique that the writer does because it's mostly through Gary's point of view, and Gary sniffs around and does his own thing. And that allows him to basically have allows the writer to trail off on some of the explanations because the dog can't hear it. The dog has gone out of earshot, so to speak. So it's like small whispers or something, and it allows us, the audience, to not have to worry about what the excuse is going to be because that's not the priority. The priority is that Gary is sniffing around. He smells something familiar. One of the things that he smells, and this goes back to finding the collar to the previous dog that died of cancer. And then as he's sniffing around parts of the barn, he ends up sniffing some fur that's like the border collie that he sniffed earlier. And it's like, oh, this, if you're paying attention, you realize the fur that he is sniffing here, which is clearly caught as a byproduct of the gears that have spat out, the previous woman, is the same border collie that he had earlier that he claimed, oh, this is this dog died of cancer.
And now we see see what really happened.
We see what really happened. And the dog doesn't make the connection, but we as the audience do, and that's playing into dramatic irony. And I was looking at this, I'm like, this is actually going to be a really difficult scene to shoot because you can how are you going to convey to the audience that the dog recognizes the fur smell here to what he smelled from the collar at the home a few scenes earlier? Like, how are you going to bridge that? Like, so you have to use some clever editing in order to make that work.
I have an idea. What you could do is, instead of having the collar at the house next to the picture, right? You just have the picture of him with his dog, having a sweet moment. And then when we go out to the field and this happens, instead of having just a tuft of fur, we have the remnants of the collar with the dog's name on the little tag. And now we realize, oh, this was Boomer. I think the dog's name was Boomer.
Boomer, yeah.
This was Boomer. And then that's an easy way to convey to the audience. What's Boomer's, the remnants of Boomer's shredded collar doing in the combine gears, right? I think that'd be a really easy way to bridge that too for the audience to understand what happened.
Oh yeah, I mean it's a little bit on the nose, but it's definitely a step closer to try and convey that. Because the other part is like editing techniques, where you just go back to you do a flashback of him smelling the collar, and then back to there, and then you just cycle it through to try and convey it. But again, you're dealing with a lot of ambiguity here because we're dealing with a character that does not speak.
And that's what I mean. And I think because there's so much of that, I think it being a little on the nose, no dog pun intended. I'd be okay with that if I saw that in film. I wouldn't feel like, whoa, that was a little bit too obvious. It's like, oh no, because it would make sense. All he does is drop him in the field and run him over. So why would he think about taking his collar off first? I mean, I wouldn't put that outside of the realm of Cameron's train of thought,
Perhaps, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, this is where we get into the dark stuff, because here Gary doesn't understand what's going on around him, so he still likes Cameron. And you're in this position as an audience member, you're like, oh my God, if only this dog knew what is actually going on. Then the other question you have to is like, well, what can the dog do, right? What can the dog do? So far, there's nothing to worry about because there's no woman in the basement. Gary's still getting fed. There's no issues happening on Cameron's side of things. He's not abusive to the dog or anything of that nature. But then we go back to the Lowe's, and Kat is there with the plant that she bought from Cameron earlier that has died. the kill-proof plant has died because she didn't water it. And Cameron's like, well, you got to water these things. Like, everybody needs a little bit of love. And she's like, okay, whatever. And he's like, let's get you some plastic plants. So he sells her a plastic plant, says that there's a couple more on order that she can come pick up when they're ready. And then we get this great little descriptive where as soon as she leaves, he reprints up the receipt that's got all of her information, her address and phone number, and tears it off, pockets it like it's a reflex. And then we know at some point Gary's going to find that cat woman in the basement. And that's the case. And what I really like about this is the fact that Kat hates dogs, and when she's in the basement, she figures out that this is the role she has to play, saying this creepy phrase to this really creepy guy, she now has to basically figure out a way to get that dog to help her. And that's the majority of the second act, is just her trying to figure out a way to communicate to this dog that you got to go help me.
Yes,
So
and I think that
what areas
that's
do you want to
really-
touch on that first before we get into the nitty gritty? Because we're coming up to the threshold where we can't spoil how this story ends.
Yeah, yeah, and we're already what, we're an hour in. This went by fast, but yeah, I think that's. I'm sitting here analyzing it. I'm thinking about it as you're kind of taking me back through the story again, and I think that's one of the. It's frustrating to not be able to be like, hey, the dog can't talk. Like, you're like, the dog still likes him. Like, there's all this, but I'm like, but that's conflict is story. That's why we care about good stories, is conflict. And this is such a natural, organic story or conflict, because he's a dog. He can't communicate to other people very easily. And he is just a dog that wants to play with a tennis ball, right? Play with balls and do these things that he has his favorite things. And then we have this girl, Kat, who, again, someone who doesn't have a lot of lines. She really doesn't, but we really care about her. First of all, because she's a true victim, right? So instantly we're like, okay, but we see what she is. She's a normal person. She can't even keep a plant alive. Then she gets abducted. And then we're there, front row seats, to see her try to figure out how in the hell she's going to get out of this psycho's basement. And the other thing I just thought of too is, did you ever worry about Cameron, which we get the reveal how bad Cameron is? Did you ever worry about Gary with Cameron? Like he was going to like kick the dog or hurt the dog in any way? Because I never did. I always felt like, oh no, I'm like, no, Gary's fine. And you would think that if you didn't write it, it'd be very easy to not write this well enough. I think that the audience would be like, well, when's he going to turn on the dog? When's he going to freak out and lose his mind over the dog? But I never felt that, not until it was appropriate at the very end, because of, we see the division. We'll get to that. But did you ever feel that?
No. And I think that's a testament to the writer trying to really show that, even though he's creating this monstrous character, he's doing the one thing that makes a monstrous character more dangerous, is the fact that he gives them something human about them. Mm-hmm. Because it then allows him to be a bit more reflective of everyone else. It's like, yep, he may be evil, but he's not so evil to the point where he doesn't like dogs. Like, he's got that one trait that connects with a lot of people, and that's what gets under audience's skin in a good way, where you're like, okay, he's not that blanket, one-dimensional evil guy. He's this character who he's looking for, like, as we said earlier, he's rewriting his past, trying to get an affirmation that he's a good person, even though he knows he's not. And he was told by his mother that he wasn't. But he's doing things to try and act like a good person outside of this horrible aspect. And one of those is he's got a dog that he absolutely, like, he didn't really want at first, but there's something about him that he attached himself to. He loves Gary. He's always attentive to him. He hates the fact that he has to leave him at home sometimes when he goes to work. He tries to get back as quickly as possible to spend time with the dog. Mm-hmm. I mean, you're just like, well, son of a gun, I hate the fact that this guy's so good with his dog. And he's not getting his dog to do anything evil either. Like, that's the other part too. He's not training him to do something bad either. He's just, here, live out the rest of your days with me. I'm good. I'll be your best friend. You be mine. And you're like, son of a gun. That's such a cool relationship.
I know, it's more conflict, right? You're like, oh, I hate that I hate that I like this part of this guy. I should just totally hate this person. And I guess that maybe that rings true with like a universal truth, right? Even these horrible people in our society that get locked up or put to death in through the judicial systems because they've done horrible things, at some point or at some level, even throughout all of their lives, they're still human. There are still good things in there. Right.
Yeah.
And we don't want to think about that because they've done all these horrible things to their fellow human beings or to kids or to anything else. But the truth is that I think maybe all of us are a little bit scared that there's some deep, dark part of us that goes, man, could that have ever been me? Making the wrong choices throughout my life. Could I have ended up in that type of a situation? And this whole story I feel like the conflict balance is so good. It's not so much conflict that you feel like it's convoluted and fake and hard to keep track of. And I don't feel like it's so non-conflictive that it's boring and I'm not invested in anything. It's just rides that thin line perfectly from the first page to last page. I loved it, script. I love it.
And I think it does it well because it contains its characters. When you're taking a look at this screenplay, you've got essentially one main character that's not Gary and Cameron. And then you have the supporting character of Kat, a very secondary character in Randy, the next door neighbor. And then one of the aspects which I want to get to in a moment, but first I want to address the Randy part because,
Okay.
right after his house gets broken into and nothing's stolen and Cameron's really worried, he kind of tidies up a little bit and he for some reason I can't remember what exactly it was, but for some reason Cameron decides to get an electric collar for Gary. And I thought what was really endearing about this is that he gets a collar and he's got it connected to his phone app and he tests it out on himself and he's like, yeah, that's too much. And he's like, to think that it would be that high is cruel. And he ranks it all the way down to like the lowest setting possible as he installs his electric fence into his backyard. And then he puts it on to Gary and he's like, yeah, I'm sorry, but I feel for your safety. If I don't want you getting away. And I like how the writer describes the fact that this collar now has trapped Gary at the house, just like he's trapped the woman. But there's two completely different reasons for why it's being done.
Yes. So true. Very different reasons.
And
yeah.
And I think this happens. This has to happen after. Gosh, like I'm trying to remember, but there's a scene where Gary somehow is barking and he manages to alert Randy. And Randy decides to come over. And he's trying to get in through the dog door. And as he's getting in through the dog door, Cameron shows up and stabs him right in the back.
Yeah, he actually hears Kat in the basement yelling for help.
Right.
And then he's like, what did he say? He's like, I effing knew it, or something like that. I knew it.
Yeah.
So he was on to Cameron, that's why he wanted that shoe. He wanted to find that shoe as evidence. And then suddenly blood comes from his mouth because he's halfway through the dog door. We can't see what's on the other side of the dog door. And here comes Cameron with his trusty garden shears, I believe they were, that he stabbed him in the back.
Stabbed him in the back, tarped him up, threw him downstairs. And this is where I realized this is a Hitchcockian style horror because it reminded me of Frenzy. And if you haven't seen Frenzy I highly recommend. Great Hitchcock serial killer thriller. But as he's trying to put Randy's body in the freezer because he can't grind it up now. He has to wait for the part for the combine.
Oh, I forgot about this part. Okay, tell me. Yes.
So he tries to put him in the freezer and he's too big to fit. So he ends up breaking each one of Randy's legs so that he can wedge it in there. And the way it's described, I don't want to really
watching. Cat is right there 10 feet away watching him do this. It's
watching
horrible.
him do this, unable to do anything. Like her mouth has been her mouth hasn't been duct taped yet, but she's just out in the corner. She knows she can't physically take him. I think she tries to hit him with like a 2x4 and it doesn't work.
Yeah, she gets halfway up the stairs and he grabs her and yanks her back down.
down.
And even then he doesn't lose his cool. He's just like, no, you shouldn't do that. He's just like, and that makes it almost weirder, creepier, scarier. Like, yeah.
More intimidating. But like he manages to get him into the freezer, locks him out there. And so you've got like Hot Pockets, bagged salmon, and other foods just kind of thawing around on the freezer right now. And that's it. He's just like, okay, it's done. And leaves her and goes back upstairs, locks her in. And Gary has no clue what to make any of this right now. All he knows is that when Cameron struck Kat, he was not happy about that because even though Kat doesn't like Gary is like, no, I like this woman. I like
peanut butter.
Yeah.
She's the peanut butter lady.
And she's really, and I mean, I like the inventive ways how Kat, she's trying to get Gary to help and Gary doesn't know what to do, but he brings a tennis ball and it falls through the vent.
Script. We forgot a major thing. If anyone's listening that hasn't read this. So there's a vent cover in the utility room upstairs that Gary can stick his head into and see directly down into the basement. Okay. So we talked about this big heavy door. We forgot to mention that there's this window basically in the floor that goes down to the basement. And that's how that's how he can see down in the basement. And that's how Kat can start to communicate with Gary upstairs. I think we kind of left
we touched on this when the first woman was there because that's what Gary saw originally. And that's how we kind of got led into this. But this is something now that Kat is aware of. And Gary manages to toss a tennis ball down there because he wants to play catch. But he's a dog. He just cares about the ball and the catch. But Kat's like, I don't know. This is not what I need right now. But then she gets the idea of like if she could write a message on the ball with some of the soot that's around the area, maybe someone will find that ball and come and help. So she puts help basement on the tennis ball and tries to throw it up many times until Gary finally caught it. And then the funny part is that he catches it and then he returns the ball to her. And I'm like, yep,
Yeah.
that's a dog.
Oh, no. He catches it. She falls off the chair, breaks her ankle, and then she hears it fall onto the floor next to her in the basement. Bounce, bounce, bounce.
Yeah.
After she breaks her ankle trying to escape this psycho's basement.
Yep.
And you're just sitting there as a reader or a viewer and just be like, oh my gosh, like you feel so bad because she's so clever. And I think that's what's hard as a writer is coming up with non-cliche ways to get your characters out of trouble, right? To be original and to be really to do something new the audiences haven't seen before. And this whole thing riding on the tennis ball and trying to get the dog to take it is such a long shot, but it's all she's got. It's all she's got to try to do, right? And I thought that was beautiful. So well done. 10 out of 10, I thought.
And then the other part too is we get to the part that Kat manages to find Randy, who's dead in the freezer. He gets his keychain. And because one of the things that's interesting is that Cameron has a keychain as well. It's on a carabiner, jangles around, and Kat is trying to use the jangling of the keychain from Randy to try and train Gary to grab the keychain off of Cameron. And she's doing it by like slobbering.
Again, an astronomical long shot, right?
Oh,
you're sitting
100%.
here going, you're sitting here, and I love to try and think of better ways. I'm like, okay, if I was in this position, what would I do? And I love to stop and really analyze. And usually I could think of one or two things that might be a little better option. And in this thing, I'm like, I can't think of anything. And so for her to be like, okay, I'm going to get the dog to associate the keys with yummy salmon, right? Was genius. I loved it. This is another great writing angle on this in the script.
And what's fascinating is that as it looks like she's getting closer and closer, we get this great twist in the tail end of the second act, where the police show up next door to Randy's and they're doing a wellness check. And we find out the reason they're doing the wellness check is that for the first time in decades, Randy didn't show up to church.
Yeah, that was so good. Mr. Bloodshot Eyes peeking through the blinds, who we all thought was psycho. No, they're doing a welfare check because he missed church for the first time in forever. And you're like, oh my God, that nice guy's downstairs in the basement with both legs crammed into a deep freeze. It's terrible.
What is great is that it's also one of the times when Gary gets the tennis ball and he's got it in his mouth. And he's next to Cameron as the cops are knocking on the door, talking to Cameron about the fact that his next door neighbor is missing. And you've got this great tension where all you're hoping for is that the cop looks down at Gary and sees the tennis ball with help written on it to actually do something. And we get this beautifully staged scene where Gary drops the ball and goes off screen and nobody notices it. But the cop asks if he can mind looking around. And Cameron's like, sure, no problem. As long as it's not against the law to have an unkept house. Otherwise, I'd be going to jail, making the jokes like that. And the cop is, walking around. And what's really interesting is how it's set up that there's not really much of any lights on in the house. So the cop is walking around with his flashlight on, inspecting the area, which should be a red flag for the cop to be like, hey, are you, behind on your power bill? Like, why are all the lights out? All that type of stuff. Doesn't ask those questions, just searches around. And then we get this staging where Cameron has got his garden shears and he's kind of positioning himself around, ready to take out this cop if he finds something that he shouldn't find. And it's very cat and mousey. And even when basically, Gary saves the cop by barking when Randy gets close and ready to plunge the shears into the back of the cop. And when the cop
was at the basement door at that point, right?
He was at the basement door. He was listening to see if he could hear anything. Kat had already been zip tied to one of the pipes and duct taped over the mouth so that she couldn't scream or anything. And I love the fact that as soon as the cop gets close and Gary barks, the cop perks up, stands upright, turns around, and Cameron is already at the other side of the room, garden shears back on where they were as if nothing happened. It's like, wow.
Yeah, like he teleported. The way it was written, it was like he just teleported. And I was okay with it because I'm like, sometimes in movies, they'll just do that. Like, I hate when someone just off screen, they're in the woods by themselves. Yeah. And then someone off screen just boom, hits them with a 2x4 or something. I'm like, dude, you would have heard that guy 20 feet away in those rustling leaves. Like, shut up. But in this situation, I was on board with it. I'm like, it was okay because Because I don't know, just the way in the context, I'm like, maybe what we thought he was closer with the shares because we're on edge because we know what this is really going on, whatever it is, like it was okay. And then doesn't Gary get the ball again and then the guy grabs it? Doesn't something happen with the
Yeah,
ball?
so the cop leaves. Gary gets the ball. Cameron grabs it, sees the soot and written on the ball, and is like, "Oh, that's not that great." And he just kind of smudges it off.
Yeah, and then he wipes it.
And then he wipes it and tosses it, and that's the end of that part. And you're like, "Oh no, that's it. There's nothing left for Kat to do. That was her one shot."
Yeah.
And
Oh, and then your hopes just fall.
your hopes
Yeah.
just fall until it's basically a late at night, and Cameron has gone to sleep, and Kat has managed to use the we missed something. I want to kind of miss it deliberately because it's something to do with the keychain and Kat and Cameron, but I don't want to mention it because I want people to read this script. And if you don't know how to find it, just Google this title of the script and the writer. If you're still having difficulties, shoot me a DM or an email at thescriptdoctorphd at gmail.com.
Bad
I will
Boy.
hook you up.
Yeah, script name Bad Boy, and the writer is Travis Braun, Braun.
Yes. So please, like, you definitely want to see this because what ends up happening is she manages to carve out a tiny hole at the bottom of the door, between the door and the floor. And she can wedge her finger through there. And she ends up starting to feed Gary's salmon and trying to get him to recognize the keys that are hanging on the hook not far from him. And Gary ends up getting them down on the ground and then inching closer and closer and closer. And
Yeah, he gets him closer, he gets some fish. He gets him closer, he gets some fish.
And it's
It
back
was
and forth.
So good.
And then
So
you get
good.
this one moment where Cameron wakes up in the middle of the night to go to the washroom. So he's in the bathroom. And then Gary gets the keys to Kat. She frees herself, and then they just make a run for it. And this is not like, you're setting up towards your climax here. So we're not going to spoil the climax, but we'll just say that she gets far enough away, but when Gary can't follow her because of the electric fence, she has to make a choice.
Oh, it's so heartbreaking. Script. This is such a good script, man.
Yep.
Yes, because here's Kat who hates dogs. Oh, and let's back up just for a second. She actually talks to Gary through the vent and explains why she hates dogs. We skipped that. Remember
Yes.
that when she talks about how she'd go to school every day.
It was a pit bull or a Rottweiler, one of those two.
I think it was a rot. It scared the crap out of her every day, and then one day that dog got loose, and she had to get. I think it was her hand, right? She had like 12 stitches in her hand or something. It attacked her.
Yep.
And so she has a very valid reason. And that really hit home or struck home for me because when I was like 9 or 10 years old, my stepdad would every summer would go on these like tours for softball, and we take like a camper trailer and go, and for like, I don't know, a week and a half, there are all these tournaments. And I remember one summer that happened, I got too close to some dog. It was a big dog, and they think I got too close to his dish, and this dog like almost took my right ear off.
Whew.
And I had to get it stitched back on. Now that for me, for whatever reason, it didn't traumatize me toward dogs, but I pretty much blacked out the whole. I remember getting close to it, and then I remember being at the hospital. So I think that blackout kind of made me so I didn't just be like, if I remembered it, I'm sure I probably would have been terrified of dogs. So anyway, I just think that was so good. We get this backstory, and it didn't feel, like sometimes when you get exposition, you're like, oh my gosh, it's so stupid, it's so on point. We know it's for us watching, right? It's so bad, and this was like she's just down there by herself, isolated for I don't know how long was she down there? 10 days at least. I don't know.
At least a week, yeah.
Yeah, and she's just talking to Gary, which they're alone in the house while Cameron's at work. It's totally believable. She's like, he's gonna kill me. She said that to him. He's gonna kill me. You got to understand. You got to help me. And he's up there with a tennis ball, like, want to play? Want to play? And then she's like, you know what? I hate dogs. And she apologized. She's like, she told him the story, and she goes, I'm sorry, that's not fair to you or whatever. And it was so well done. And I'm like, again, that was another just nugget of goodness. But back to that night, she runs across the threshold of the fence line. She's to the tree line, and she's like home free, and she's like free. And then I think she hears the noise, right? She hears the buzz of the collar.
The buzz and a little yelp from Gary.
Yeah, and she turns around, and poor Gary's there, the gate wide open in the moonlight, and he can't cross that line because every time he tries, he gets zapped. And she has to make that choice. And sorry, I don't want to steal this moment from you, script, but yeah, what happens? What's going on inside her head?
I mean, it's basically, run and you're free, or help the dog, right? And
help the dog that helped save you, but you also don't like dogs. But like, it was just this conflict that was so believable. and so heart-wrenching. It was so good.
And you know, I think that's a sweet spot to do the threshold. Like, what does she do, right? Because you guys have to read this script. If you haven't figured it out right now, you pretty much know what we're gonna vote on for this, because it's really well written. I mean, it's from a different perspective. It does have similarities to other kidnapping type stories, but it's just done in a far more clever way. I mean, this is the whole idea of like, give me something that's the same but different, right? What's the same? Okay, serial killer traps someone in their basement. Great. What's the different? Well, the dog's the only one that can rescue her. You know, so like that's what's the gimmick to it that works.
And then to do it in a way that you go, oh, okay, I believe it. I believe that a dog as smart and experienced as Gary could figure this out and get the keys closer and closer to get his, like, it's all believable. The timeline in which it happens is believable. The characters that it revolves around are all believable. None of this did I feel like, yeah, it would be a fun movie. It'd be an entertaining film. But I was just like, but I'd have to suspend that at all in this. I was on board for every second of this. I believed all of this could have happened, except for maybe that he could have chopped up so many people in one combine without it having serious damage way before we saw it fall apart. But I can forgive that, right? That's one small thing. But yeah, that scene, this thing had me a little teary-eyed several times, starting with that opening scene where the family died. Like it was so good. And then and then what happens? I know where you want to leave this off. So what happens after her conflict with what to do with Gary there?
Oh, that's the question, right? Like,
you want to stop right there?
I want to stop right there. I don't want to spoil.
Okay.
I want people to go read this script. This is definitely feeding into the type of movies that a lot of people have missed and want to see. Ideally, it would be in a perfect world. This script will get made into a movie one day. Probably not for a few years, but maybe I don't know. But it's really strong.
A24 could do this film right, I believe.
Oh yeah, Lionsgate could do this.
I think they could do a fantastic job with it. Yeah.
Universal, with their fact that they are leaning into doing a bit more horror films, they're getting back behind horror films. Blumhouse Studios would be great for this film. It's low budget, low cast, pretty much contained to that one set in the house.
And don't do a CGI dog. They need to train a dog to do all these little things. No CGI. It would be so awesome to get the right mutt to play this role, this crossbreed of a terrier that's, kind of scruffy and, it'd be so good, man. I want to talk more about it, but I know we got to leave it there. But yeah, you got to read this script, you guys. It's incredible.
Oh yeah. So with that, TJ, I mean, is this a pass or a green light?
Oh, this is like 5 green lights, man. I wouldn't even have hesitated if I had the power. I'd be like, make this happen. I would have, if I was the boss, I'd get on the phone and be like, yep, do it, get it going. I want to see this out by next summer. Like, it's just, I think it has a mass appeal. The biggest thing I see here is it's original. I've never seen or read anything quite like this. It pulls from a lot of things, but it makes its own thing, which really is just how things are now. We're so far into entertainment for hundreds of years with books and film and TV now that it's really hard to be 100% original. It's just, I don't know if it can even be done. And this is not a sequel. It's not a prequel. It's not a remake. It's not a remaster. It's not any of this other crap that we're all drowning in right now with the lack of originality. This is great. My favorite script so far this year was Madden. I loved Madden. But this by far, I thought Madden was like an 8. This is a 10. This kind of bumps Madden down maybe to a 7 now at this point, because this was so good. This guy needs to get this made. He needs to get paid. Fantastic. I want to read more of his scripts now. That's where it left me.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat as you. I'm definitely going to give this a green light. It's the type of stuff that that actually shapes, the industry, especially in the horror and suspense. Like we get a lot of horror films that are just flat out horror, like Terrifier 2 and we had the Thanksgiving last year, which is a slasher, got all that type of stuff. You had Saw again, but we don't get anything that's like really suspense driven. We kind of got a little bit of that a few years back with the Invisible Man. That Blumhouse.
We got some of that. We did get some of that with Megan. I think that was somewhat original.
We got some of that with Megan because they released a PG-13 version, and then they have an R version that you can like stream. The R version is definitely more on the gory side of things, but both versions were pretty decent overall. And I think like this is like the sweet spot. This is as I said earlier, it's Hitchcockian. It's not it's not. It circumvents the visuals of the violent, gory, and bloody, and lets your imagination kind of take you into that area without them having to do that level of work.
What I call the murder porn. It lets you do that in your imagination. It's not a murder porn film. It's like, no, that's not what we're getting off on. This is about this conflict with survival and humanity and good versus evil. Like, I was just, it was good.
Yeah, and it's like, this is, it's a classic type of suspense that I miss seeing, seeing in movies and trying to find movies that have that. So this is a fantastic one. We actually have a comment on the Patreon from Adolpha, who mentioned this script. And remember, guys, if you aren't subscribed to the Patreon, please go subscribe. You can comment on the script and posts that we put on Mondays of what we'll be reading and talking about every Saturday, and we read them live on the show. Or you can, if you have a question or something about the script, you can send in a super chat. We'll read it live here. For now, we got Adolpha, one of the Patreons, who says, Dogs in Horror has been done well before with Bad Moon, which is about a brother who comes to live with his sister. Turns out he's become a werewolf, and only the dog knows. So there's something there where you got a dog that's playing a proxy to the audience with dramatic irony, and that they know something about what's going on in this world that every other character that we're interacting with doesn't quite understand. Thank you for the comment and support, Adolpha.
That was Bad Moon? Is that what that was?
Yes, Bad Moon.
I'm gonna look that up.
So yeah, that's pretty much it. Again, I really hope things go well. So Travis Braun has been writing for over 10 years in the industry. He's done a couple of dog shows for children mostly. And I think that ended up working out well for him because he's taken something that allows you to connect, animals to an audience and then decide to put a suspense horror spin on it. That's showing inventiveness, and I have to say that works out well. He's also worked on projects like Criminal Minds as a writer production assistant, so he's definitely got the concept of serial killers and criminals and there under his belt. So he really just combined the best of his experience into this one script, and I think he knocked it out of the park. I'm really hoping if this doesn't get made to a feature or put into actual production, I really hope that he manages to at least get some additional writing work as a result of this, because he's definitely got some pedigree in regards to his talent with that. So before we call the show, TJ, is there any last thoughts you want to share with the audience?
No, I would just reiterate, read it. It's worth it. I know it's hard. We're all busy in our lives, but make this a priority if you can. You won't regret it. It's a quick read. I think I read it in maybe an hour and 15. It's only 96 pages, I think.
Yeah.
And it's just, it's good. And you need to see the ending. I hope we set that up and didn't spoil it. You need to read the ending. It's good. It's a good ending. A lot of horror movies just kind of, you're like, eh. This one felt really good.
It's a very rewarding ending. It's one where you're like, yep, I'm glad I made it to the end. And I'm not going to tell you if it's happy or bad. I'm just going to say it's really good.
It's good. It is good. And we need more scripts like this that are actually going to get made. Please, for the love of God, we need to get out of the Dark Ages era of all these remakes and remasters and sequels and stuff like
blatant derivatives as opposed to creative derivatives.
Yes, exactly. And it just sucks. And I know that Hollywood's being very conservative at this point. It's the only thing they're conservative on is taking risk in trying new things. And no, knock it off. We need to get back to like the 90s and the early aughts, where it's like, yeah, we're trying all sorts of crazy new things, because that's how we get to new IPs, right? We're never going to get to new IPs that are awesome and that do take off if we just are so busy remaking everything that was hot in the 70s and 80s and 90s. I'm just sick of it. Let's move on, because none of them are as good as the originals. They're just not. And we need to wake up and stop giving them money for that crap. Let's move on and get some good stuff like this.
All right. Well, I want to thank everyone out there listening today. I really hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as we enjoyed having it. Again, seek out this script if you can. It is out there available for you. Just requires a little bit of elbow grease. But if you are having difficulties, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. Contacts are in the description here. With that being said, I want to wish you all a wonderful long weekend. And with that in mind, never forget, guys, when it comes to great story, it all starts with the script.